Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
True crime with a dash of the paranormal, the garish, the strange, and the darkly comic. I'm Zevin Odelberg, and you've found your way to Kinda Murdery, a place that means more than just murder. It's my very own pocket dimension, home to a curated collection of bizarre and compelling stories, the unsolved, the unsettling, and the unbelievable. I cover it all, just so long as it's kinda murdery. Hey everybody, welcome to Kinda Murdery. I am your host Zevin Odelberg, and I am thrilled that you are here. We have reached part 3 of the Chicago Horror, Leopold and Loeb. So if you haven't heard parts 1 and 2 yet, go back, listen to them, get caught up, and then rejoin us. We'll save a seat for you. And if you're ready to go, then so am I. I would only ask that you put your personal items underneath the seat in front of you. Stow your carry-on in the overhead compartment. Buckle your seatbelt and let go of the cares of the day. But be warned, there's turbulence expected ahead. Kinda Murdery starts now. Mulroy and Goldstein had already been upon the scene and were interrogating a handful of curious spectators who happened to be by when a railroad laborer espied the dead body. The present theater of events constituted no more than a wide expanse of swamp and weed, which could only be approached from the beaten path by way of a railroad embankment. There was a small path which led from the rails to a wood culvert stretched across a small stream. The body of Robert had been stuffed under the culvert. The finder of the body stated that it was so lodged that half the body, which was not submerged in water, was jammed securely against the culvert's bottom at the point where the culvert joined the stream's bank. So inaccessible was the place, and so well hidden was the body, that all who were gathered there agreed that its finding was some determined act of Providence. The two reporters lost no time in joining detectives from the nearest police station in a minute examination of the territory for possible clues. Sleuth-inclined spectators also lent a hand, so that a fair-sized congregation of policemen, civilians, and reporters were engaged in the hunt. One civilian, Paul Korff, caught sight of a gleaming object lying in the mud under the culvert. Mulroy was standing near when Korff leaned down to study the object. Both recognized it as a pair of horn-rimmed spectacles, whereupon Mulroy judiciously took charge of them, explaining that he was a newspaper reporter and that if anything developed he would let Korff know. The police were not told. Mulroy hurriedly informed his colleague of the find, and while Korff had been given to understand that something might come of those glasses, Mulroy pocketed the spectacles and renewed the search for further clues. Meanwhile, Dr. Joseph Springer, physician for the coroner of Cook County, arrived accompanied by a horde of news-hungry reporters and picture-starved photographers. He had made his cursory examination of the body and wanted a final study of the culvert spot. Plainly, the doctor was puzzled. "I haven't even determined the cause of death yet," he told reporters. "There's a small abrasion on the head in the front and an apparent laceration at the base of the skull. The wounds do not appear to be serious enough to have caused death. On the other hand, there's a light sepia stain about the mouth. It is possible that he was poisoned, although I did not detect the presence of any poison in the stomach." Dr. Springer also disclosed that the face had been burned as if by an acid solution. The physician then proceeded to question Tony Mink, the laborer who came upon the body, after which he made a close examination of the culvert spot. While thus engaged, he was accosted by a young man bearing a metal bar 8 inches long. "Found it just beyond the culvert," announced the youth carelessly. Dr. Springer took it gingerly, produced a handkerchief, and laid the bar in it. Wound about one end was a batch of adhesive tape. The covering was fairly clean, indicating that it had not lain in the swampy ground for long. "I believe," declared Dr. Springer, turning to the waiting reporters, "that this was the instrument that killed Robert Franks." Goldstein and Mulroy waited no longer. Jumping into the cab they'd kept waiting, they were off toward the city, the precious glasses safe in their possession. They had two anxieties: the glasses and the unspeakable amount of the cab bill. Public reaction to press reports that Robert Franks had been murdered and the body had been found was unstinted. People of all races and ages were roused as a crime had never roused them before. The gruesome grave, The brutal circumstances of his apparent death and the savage act of the kidnappers in leading the father to believe that he was ransoming his son who was already dead, stirred the heart of every newspaper reader. Prominent men spoke their feelings freely. Detectives and investigators pledged themselves to solve the crime and bring the perpetrators to justice swiftly and surely. Deeper indignation followed substantial reports to the effect that the body had been attacked. The police were spurred to a frenzy of activity, and the state's attorney was assigning his best assistance to the investigation. Science was consulted in the person of criminologists, psychologists, and chemists, the latter being given all such objects and articles for analysis as might yield valuable clues. A question and answer symposium of the opinions of Chicago's best detectives and the circumstances of the kidnapping and the murder of the Franks boy went something like this. Question: who killed Robert Franks? Answer: a kidnapper seeking ransom or a moron? Question: what killed him? Answer: after making every possible examination, the coroner's physician says it must have been caused by suffocation. But why suffocation? Answer: the boy had been choked or strangled. He had not been poisoned. He had been hit on the head with a blunt instrument, but not hard enough to cause death. He was found in 2 feet of water, and although his lungs were copper-colored, he had not been drowned. Suffocation seems the only possible way by which he could have come to his death. Well, question: how was he suffocated? Answer: probably by a handkerchief or a hand pressed to his nose and mouth for a period of about 2 minutes. Why was the boy killed? Now this is a debatable question. If he was killed by a moron, or several of them, he probably was killed accidentally while in a struggle with them, a struggle which induced hemorrhages of the lungs from which he died. Or they may have killed him to cover up their crime, to keep the boy from telling. Question: what if he was killed by the kidnappers? Answer: then also probably in a struggle with his captors and from a hemorrhage of the lungs induced by a hand pressed over the nose and mouth. Indications are that the kidnappers would not have deliberately killed the boy so quickly, at least not until negotiations showed signs of failing and they must make a getaway. Question: when was Robert killed? Answer: probably within a few minutes after he was abducted or lured away while he was struggling for his freedom. Question: where was he killed? Answer: probably in an automobile in the 3-block stretch between his school and his home. The theory is that he could not have been kidnapped or lured away on foot without some of his companions becoming aware of it. Well, what sort of person must the police seek in the murder? Answer: a scholarly person, a master of English. None but such a person could have written the famous letter received by Mr. Franks. Its grammar was faultless. Question: was there any peculiarity in the letter? Answer: yes. The spelling of the word kidnapped, spelled Kidnaped. The strictly English version of the word includes 2 P's. Question: if the boy was killed by kidnappers, why did they persist in their demands for a ransom long after the boy was dead and his unidentified body recovered? Answer: they did not know the body had been recovered and attempted to obtain the ransom money despite his murder. Question: if a moron or several of them killed the boy, why the telephone messages and the letter demanding the kidnapper's ransom? Answer: to cover up the real motive of the crime, to throw detectives off the track, possibly to obtain money for a desperate attempt to get away. Question: what is the more likely theory? Murder by the kidnappers or murder by morons? Answer: no attempt is made to answer this yet. Only the remarkable letter and the suspicions of Mr. Edelson lend a basis to the moron theory. Question: well, was the boy attacked? Answer: coroner's physician says he probably was not, although it is difficult to determine this. Attempts to attack him might have been made, and some form of attacks accomplished without leaving external evidence of violence. Question: was the writer of the erudite letter a good typist? Answer: not according to the findings of Mr. Sutton, the typewriter expert. Question: did the addressing of the envelope in printed letters in ink indicate anything concerning the writer? Answer: yes, it indicated the writer might have known something of cartooning or that he was at least familiar with mechanical drawing and lettering. Question: is it possible that a woman was involved in the slaying? Answer: it is. The pair of eyeglasses found near the culvert seemed to be a woman's. Question: is there any other evidence to indicate a woman's hand in the crime? Answer: nothing. Everything else points to it as the work of a man or men. While this summary clarified the atmosphere on several issues, it only served to further complicate any conception of a motive for the crime or of the character of the guilty person or persons. The crime of the century was defying solution. Meanwhile, Mulroy and Goldstein had secured the assistant state attorney Joseph Savage and were imploring him to do something about the glasses. At the suggestion of the 2 reporters, prosecutor Savage went with them on a canvass of optical firms in Chicago. The first two concerns flatly declared there was no way of tracing the glasses. The next shop was the firm of Almer Co. and Company. Here, a Mr. Weinstein went over the spectacles thoroughly. "This is a peculiar pair of glasses," he informed the men. "They have a special hinge device which has been patented by a New York firm. The frame possibly was made in New York, and it is altogether likely the lenses were bought here. This company is an agent for that firm." Mr. Weinstein then took the glasses' measurements. These he scribbled on a piece of paper, which was handed in turn to a second clerk. In a moment, the latter had returned, and Mr. Weinstein was reading his notation. "The lenses for these glasses were purchased by Nathan Leopold, 4754 Greenwood Avenue." "That's a swell address," said Goldstein, nudging his partner. "I wonder," answered Mulroy, "if that's the Leopold I knew at the University of Chicago." "Well," broke in the other, "let's go see." The two cubs arrived at the Leopold home accompanied by Detective Sergeants Edward Anderson and Hugh Burns of the State Attorney's Office, who had instructions to arrest Nathan Leopold. In response to their knock, a maid came to the door. She greeted them. "How do you do?" "Is Nathan Leopold home?" "Why, yes. Will you wait till I can get him?" "No thanks, lady. We'll step right inside. We're detectives. Where's his room?" Frightened, the maid pointed to a door on the second floor near the stairs. They bounded up just in time to meet Nathan Leopold coming out of his room. He was taken aback by the abruptness of his collars and by apparently nothing more. His curious gaze spoke for an explanation of the strange intrusion. "Nathan Leopold?" asked Sergeant Anderson. "Yes," was the calm answer. "You're under arrest. You have to come with me." "Well, why?" "I can't talk about that now. Will you come along?" Leopold indicated that he would, whereupon he donned his topcoat and hat and left in the company of the detectives. As their car pulled away, a second car drew up, and Captain Shoemaker and his squad got out. Without any delay, they took what seemed to be complete possession of the house. One herded the servants into a single room. A second went out to the garage. A third covered the rooms upstairs. Captain Shoemaker took charge of the questioning of the servants. From them he sought detailed information of the life, habits, and acquaintances of Nathan Leopold. He heard, at any rate, of a unique person. And we'll find out just how unique when Kinda Murdery returns after the break. Hello everyone, we are back. Thank you for taking the time to support the brands that support Kinda Murdery. I'm super into this story right now, so I'm not going to spend quite as long in this section as I usually do. But I do want to remind everyone, please do reach out to me, share your stories, whether you're disabled physically or otherwise, whether you just have a unique life experience. Let's continue to add human stories to our library of experience so that we can all learn to understand each other better and create opportunities to become more compassionate. Also, please do remember the free 3-digit number, 988, that you can call at any time to immediately be connected to a counselor to talk to you about substance use, mental health, or suicidal thought-related issues. Please do remember that number, 988. Program it into your phone, and always, always remember that the world is a better place with you in it. And if you're not in acute crisis and you just want to connect with somebody, please do feel free to reach out to me, kindamurdery@gmail.com, or @kindamurdery on all social media. Alright, with that, the fasten seatbelt sign is on. I have to ask you to return to your seat and buckle your seatbelt, because Kinda Murdery resumes now. As their car pulled away, a second car drew up, and Captain Shoemaker and his squad got out. Without any delay, they took what seemed to be complete possession of the house. One herded the servants into a single room. A second went out to the garage. A third covered the rooms upstairs. Captain Shoemaker took charge of the questioning of the servants. From them he sought detailed information of the life, habits, and acquaintances of Nathan Leopold. He heard, at any rate, of a unique person. Although not 21, Nathan Leopold already had a bachelor's degree from the University of Chicago and was a fluent speaker of 15 languages, author of several brilliant monographs on ornithology, and a medical student of the University of Michigan. In short, an academic genius. His most intimate friend was Richard Loeb, whose home was pointed out from the room's window as within a stone's throw. Captain Shoemaker dispatched a man to the Loeb residence. The aide returned in short time with a fairly good-looking young man. "Where were you yesterday?" asked the captain, addressing Loeb. "Well, that's a long story," returned the youth, smiling. "Yeah? Cut in Captain Shoemaker, to whom as a grizzled police veteran all subjects were smart Alecs whether they'd a college degree or not? Well, we'll see. You can tell it to the state's attorney." Issuing a final warning to the servants that they were not to discuss the incident with anyone but policemen, Captain Shoemaker ordered a retreat, and in a moment the squad car with Richard Loeb inside was speeding toward the loop. The destination was the Drake Hotel, which State's Attorney Robert Crowe had appointed as headquarters for the investigation into the crime of the century. When the Shoemaker party arrived, Crowe was questioning Nathan Leopold. Leopold was seated at a table across from the former and seemed to be the most self-possessed person in the room. "Leopold," Crowe was asking, "are these your glasses?" The young man leaned forward to study them. "Well, yes, sir, they are." "How do you account for the fact that they were found in a prairie at 122nd Street and Pennsylvania Railroad tracks?" "Oh, there?" "Well, yes, there. I suppose I lost them." "Well, no doubt, but I think you lost them under circumstances that make things very serious for you." "Well, I don't see how. If I recall correctly, I've been to that spot at least a half a dozen times." State's Attorney Crowe was obviously surprised. "Well, for what?" "Field work." "What kind of field work?" "Why, in connection with my ornithological studies. I've gone there frequently to catch moth and butterfly specimens." "Sure of that?" "Well, I'm sure my professor will vouch for it." It was evident that Leopold was not getting the worst of it. "Specifically, when was the last time you were there?" "About 5 days ago. Let's see, this is Friday. It was last Saturday. More than 5 days." "Do you know that these glasses are exceptionally clean after lying in a swampy prairie for 5 days?" "Well, then it's possible they were handled. It hasn't rained since then." State's Attorney Crowe switched the subject and produced the ransom letter received by Mr. Franks, which he asked Leopold to read. "Could you write a letter like that?" Crowe asked when the other had finished. "Well, yes, I could easily duplicate it if I couldn't write a better one." "Are you a Phi Beta Kappa member?" "Well, yes, sir." "Where were you all day Wednesday?" "Well, I didn't leave the house until 11 o'clock in the morning. Then I went over to Dick Loeb's and we decided to go for an automobile ride. He came back home with me and I got my car. We rode all afternoon." "Just the two of you?" "Well, later on we picked up a couple of girls." "Then where'd you go?" "We drove through Lincoln Park, parked out near the lake, and had a little romantic time." "Can you say where you were at 5 o'clock?" "I believe I can. Let's see. That's the time we were at Lincoln Park." "Well, then where'd you go?" "Stayed there for a couple hours, then we got something to eat and bought a few drinks. Then we took another ride and dumped the girls off and went home." "Who were the girls?" "Never saw them before." "Didn't they tell you their names?" "Well, no, sir, and we didn't ask." At this point in the proceedings, Captain Shoemaker made a hurried departure with an aide later explained to Crowe as part of an important mission. Questioned by Assistant State's Attorney Savage, Loeb substantiated nearly all of his friend's statements. He did not have the self-confidence that Leopold did, however. If he had, well then perhaps... The state's attorney was not satisfied with the outcome of the questioning. In fact, he was beginning to believe that Loeb and Leopold were victims of an unusual chain of circumstances. He hinted that he would release them perhaps in the morning. For the time being, they could stay in the hotel as technical prisoners, he said. The inseparable Mulroy and Goldstein were not letting the grass grow under their feet. Again, they were riding in cabs, with fearful eyes on the meter, this time in quest of a drugstore from which Mr. Johnson had phoned the Franks' home concerning directions for the delivery of the ransom money. The process was fatiguing. From all appearances, the particular drugstore was not in the immediate vicinity, for queries in several drugstores thereabouts yielded nothing. The two proceeded further east on 63rd Street. They paused before the establishment of a C.M. Ross at 1465 East 63rd Street. To go in or not to go in? That was their question. "I think we've played this thing out," said a tired Goldstein. "Well, let's give it one more turn," answered Mulroy, a little hopefully, whereupon the two entered more in the spirit of adventure than business. They sought out Mr. Ross himself. "Yeah, Mr. Ross is here. I'll call him," said the clerk. The proprietor appeared in the person of a short, thick-set, middle-aged man. He beamed upon his callers. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" "We're newspaper reporters," Mulroy began. "We're trying to trace a telephone call to some drugstore in the neighborhood in connection with the Franks murder. Do you have any information that might help us?" "The Franks murder?" asked the startled druggist, following it up with the question, "Do you think somebody called from here?" "Well, it's just possible. You see, it might have been that message was left with a clerk or someone to be given to a well-dressed man or something like that. Could you say?" The proprietor stroked his chin in thought. Then his eyes opened wide. He tried to speak, but in his excitement could only stutter over unintelligible consonants. In a moment, he had gone to the cashier's desk and was back again, bearing a sealed envelope. This letter," he stammered, "left here for a man. They said the man would ask for it and he'd have a cigar box in his hands." Mulroy tore open the envelope with nervous fingers and found a single sheet of plain stationery, upon which was typed the following message. Alright, we're gonna pause our story right there. If you want to find out what the letter said, please join me this Sunday, October 23rd, for the thrilling finale of The Chicago Horror, Leopold and Loeb. Oh, and hey guys, by the way, I'm super excited because next Thursday, October 27th, I'm guesting on British Murders with Stuart Blues to tell the story of Dr. Holly Crippen. Please be sure to check out British Murders on Thursday, October 27th, and to come right back here on Sunday, October 23rd for, once again, the thrilling conclusion of The Chicago Horror, Leopold and Loeb. I'm Zevin Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery. Thank you so much for lending me your ears. If you've enjoyed today's Kinda Murdery, please tell your friends and family, tell strangers, leave a review. It's the best way to ensure that I can keep telling that special brand of bizarre and terrible tales that you'll only find here on Kinda Murdery.